Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really digging into the whole Bed Bath & Beyond saga.
It's quite a story.
Yeah, and we're using a specific YouTube analysis as our guide. It's called BDBY Vulture's Nest Connect the Dots Part 8
Right.
from the Rantz channel.
Right.
So the idea is to kind of cut through the noise, get straight to the key points about how the company got here and, who the major players are.
Exactly. We know listeners want to understand these complex situations without getting bogged down. This analysis gives us a pretty detailed perspective to work from.
And just to be clear, our source is primarily the transcript from that video. It's one specific viewpoint, but it's packed with information.
Definitely a lot to unpack.
Okay, so let's jump in. The video starts by talking about this angle of vulture capitalism.
Yeah.
What does it mean in this specific context?
Well, the video basically defines it as investors or firms that specifically target companies already in financial trouble.
To profit from their weakness.
Pretty much, yeah. The video creator notes it's often criticized because, well, you're going after companies that are already vulnerable. Though, the argument on the other side is that sometimes these investors do provide needed cash or force necessary restructuring, even if it's painful for shareholders.
Okay, so identifying weakness. And the video connects this to the current economy, with interest rates going up.
Precisely.
Yeah.
The analysis points to this current distressed credit cycle. Rising interest rates just make everything harder for companies carrying debt or already struggling.
Amplifies the problem.
Exactly. Makes it harder to meet obligations, creates more opportunities for these distressed credit specialists to step in. The video even sort of suggests the Fed's policies are playing a role here.
Interesting. Okay, so when did Bed Bath & Beyond really pop up on the radar for these types of investors? According to the video, it mentions 2019.
Yeah, 2019 was key. That was the first year the company actually reported negative net income.
The first loss.
Right. And according to the video, that was like a big flashing sign for distressed credit investors, a signal that, okay, this company is declining, maybe there's an opportunity here.
And things moved pretty quickly after that, didn't they? There was a letter from some investment firm.
Oh, yeah. Also in 2019, 3 firms, Ancora, Legion Partners, and Macellum Capital Management, they sent this joint letter.
What is this?
It was pretty aggressive. They basically demanded the CEO be replaced, the entire board go, and they proposed nominating 16 of their own people to the board.
16? Wow. That's not subtle.
Not at all. A clear power play.
The video also touches on executive compensation from before this period. Why bring that up?
Well, it highlights that between 2003 and 2017, just 3 executives, Steve Tamaris, Warren Eisenberg, and Leonard Feinstein, apparently made something like $313 million combined.
Wow.
The video creator uses this to suggest that maybe part of the motivation for these activist investors was seeing what they considered, excessive pay and potential mismanagement, especially given where the company ended up.
Okay, let's zoom in on one of those firms, Legion Partners. The video focuses quite a bit on a co-founder, Christopher S. Kipper. What's the story there?
The analysis really emphasizes his background, calling it his pedigree. The idea is that understanding where he came from helps understand his potential motives.
So where did he work?
Shamrock Capital, Ridgestone Corporation, and significantly, Global Crossing.
Global Crossing.
Mm.
The video says that wasn't always listed prominently on his bio. Why is that highlighted?
The implication seems to be that maybe it's not a connection he wants to advertise too much. Global Crossing, the telecom company, had that enormous bankruptcy back in 2002.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah, the video mentions allegations around investor deception, inflated value. It was a huge collapse.
And the video draws lines connecting Global Crossing to his other roles.
It does. It mentions Global Crossing's founder, Gary Winnick, came from Drexel Burnham Lambert, the Milken-era junk bond firm. And apparently after Global Crossing, Winnick funded a company called Pacific Group Capital, which then funded Ridgestone Corporation, where Kipper worked. Abbott L. Brown, also tied to Global Crossing, was involved at Ridgestone too. So it paints a picture of interconnected players.
And Shamrock Capital, associated with Disney, known for aggressive tactics.
Yeah, the video links Shamrock to Disney and notes its reputation for, let's say, assertive strategies, maybe even hostile takeovers. It also mentions people connected to consulting firms like FTI Consulting and Credit Suisse who've worked with Shamrock, suggesting a network used to dealing with these complex, sometimes aggressive situations.
Okay, let's shift to the second firm, Macellum Capital Management and Jonathan Duskin. The video kind of casts him as the pilot here.
That's the term used, yeah. Piloting the Bed Bath & Beyond takeover effort. And it also links him to Kohl's, another retailer facing challenges.
Kohl's. Didn't they also have activist pressure?
They did. And the video notes Kohl's significant cash burn and the presence of big private equity like KKR and Blackstone on its board, drawing a parallel perhaps to the kind of players involved.
Duskin's resume also has some notable entries. SAC Capital.
Yes, the video points out he worked at SAC Capital, Steve Cohen's fund, infamous for those insider trading penalties. Also, Printon's Capital Management. The suggestion is he's part of this wider web of investment professionals, some of whom have been involved with other meme stocks too, like GameStop and AMC.
And Duskin himself had a stake in Bed Bath & Beyond.
Apparently owned 400,000 shares personally, according to the video, which, could align his interests, though the video later questions the timing of his firm's trades.
Right.
Oh, and it also reminds us he was a managing director at Lehman Brothers.
Lehman, another major collapse. Okay,
Yeah.
So you have these three firms, Ancora, Legion, Macellum, all moving around the same time. How do they coordinate? Does the video offer any ideas?
It floats a possible connection through a senior analyst named Austin Baker, who apparently used to work at McKinsey.
The big consulting firm.
Right. The video then briefly mentions this idea of the four mavericks, key figures from McKinsey, BCG, Bain, Harvard Business School, who really shaped modern corporate strategy. The implication is maybe people from these top consulting firms know each other, share networks, facilitate that kind of alignment.
Interesting connection.
And it notes the nomination date for that initial board slate was May 1st, 2019.
Okay, so moving on to the board itself. Some key names pop up. Harry Edelman. She was spokesperson after the CFO's death.
Yes, Harriet Edelman. She stayed on the board and was indeed the spokesperson after Gustavo Arnal's tragic death. The video highlights her ties to Apollo Global Management and Avon. It even mentions Avon sharing an address with Apollo, suggesting a close link.
Apollo keeps coming up.
It does. And the video points to other directors brought in who had backgrounds at places like Boston Consulting Group, and importantly, Alvarez and Marsal.
Alvarez Marsal.
Yeah.
The video positions them as specialists in distressed situations, right?
Exactly. A major player in distressed credit consulting. They've been involved in huge bankruptcies, Enron, Lehman Brothers. The video notes Brian Marcel was involved early on with Lehman.
And the current CEO, Sue Gove.
She was a senior director at Alvarez and Marsal, and the video links her appointment to Andrew Jawar, who is chairman of the Fresh Market, which is owned by
Apollo.
Apollo, yeah. And Gove herself apparently helped Gulfsmith International with its bankruptcy filing before this.
So a lot of experience with companies not doing well.
Who could say that?
Yeah.
The video also mentions Holly Etlin from Alex Partners, another restructuring firm involved in FTX alongside Alvarez and Marsal, and David Kasten, a lawyer,
Kasten's background.
lead counsel for Toys R Us when it was dealing with Bain Capital, KKR, Vornado. Also general counsel for Second Corps, where Leon Black, Apollo's founder, was on the board. He's painted as a go-to lawyer for these distressed credit players.
Wow. It's quite the network being described. The video then talks about a strong arm and potential conflicts of interest. What's that about?
Well, first, it points out that almost all the board nominees, everyone except Duskin himself, gave power of attorney for SEC filings to both Duskin and Kipper.
Meaning Duskin and Kipper could act on their behalf for filings.
Essentially, yeah. Consolidating control, positioning them as team leaders. But the really controversial part is the video creator's assertion about short selling.
Betting the stock would go down.
Right. The video suggests, based on timing, that Legion Partners and Macellum shorted Bed Bath & Beyond stock before they went public with their activist campaign and large stakes.
So they potentially profited from the stock drop before trying to push it up or take control.
That's the implication. The video raises the idea of a potential pump and dump scenario and questions the legality of that kind of coordinated move by hedge funds. It also notes that later the board was shrunk down to just 4 people, including Sue Gove and Joshua Schechter, who also apparently has ties to Apollo.
Okay, this is a lot. Let's talk about something the company itself did, those massive stock buybacks. The video is critical of that, right?
Extremely critical. Spending nearly $12 billion buying back stock.
$12 billion.
At an average price, the video states was around $44 a share. Compare that to where the stock is now, hovering around $1.30 when the video was made.
That's a huge amount of money seemingly vaporized.
Exactly. The video really questions the judgment of spending that much cash, especially when the company was already showing signs of financial decline, negative cash flow. It asks, Why were they doing that instead of investing in the business or shoring up the balance sheet?
A fair question. And what about the company's current state, financially speaking, as per the video?
It paints a pretty grim picture. At the time of the video, cash reserves were apparently only enough for about 2.9 months of operations.
Ooh.
Huge net losses, ongoing store closures. Then there's the sale of warrants, which dilutes existing shareholders' value. They raised about $135 million gross from that.
Dilution meaning more shares out there, so each existing share is worth less.
Basically, yes. And it mentions a New York Times report about Hudson Bay Capital agreeing to help sell up to $1 billion more in shares to try and avoid bankruptcy. More potential dilution.
So any talk of a short squeeze turnaround seems unlikely, according to this analysis.
The video creator dismisses it, says the fundamentals are just too weak, the core business model is seen as flawed, and recovery looks improbable from their perspective.
Now, the video brings up this concept, the Wharton way. What's that about?
The Wharton Way is presented as this idea of an informal kind of mutual support network among graduates of UPenn's Wharton Business School.
Like an old boys club, but from Wharton.
Sort of, yeah. The video suggests this network might lead to regulators maybe not scrutinizing actions by fellow alumni as aggressively as they might otherwise. It's presented as a potential factor in how things play out in the financial world.
That's a strong claim. Does it name names?
Oh, yeah. It lists quite a few prominent Wharton alumni: Donald Trump, Gary Gensler, the current SEC commissioner.
Wow, the head of the SEC.
Yep.
Also Howard Marks from Oak Tree Capital, Mike Milken, the junk bond pioneer from Drexel, Warren Buffett attended for a bit, Steve Cohen from SE Capital. That's Wentz. It is. And the video suggests these connections might, subtly influence things. It also points to the Wharton Restructuring and Distressed Investing Conference as a place where many players involved in these kinds of situations, including those tied to Bed Bath & Beyond, gather.
Okay, so bringing it all together, what's the final verdict from the video creator?
Deep skepticism about Bed Bath & Beyond as an investment, mainly because of who's involved.
The people with ties to distressed debt, private equity, bankruptcy consulting.
Exactly. The central argument is that this board, with all its connections, might not be focused on saving the company for public shareholders. Their interests might align more with, say, debt holders or the consultants profiting from the restructuring or bankruptcy process.
It mentions comparisons to AMC and HYMC. Yeah, briefly, as other examples where similar dynamics might be at play, involving some of the same types of firms, like Mudrick Capital with HYMC. It warns against focusing just on market mechanics, like short interest, and urges looking at the company's actual business health.
And the conclusion on the current leadership.
The video's opinion is pretty clear. Sue Gove and the board are steering the ship towards bankruptcy, which, again, it argues serves the interests of the debt holders and consultants involved.
So let's quickly recap this deep dive based on the Rantz video. We started with the vulture capitalist angle, saw the early warning signs in 2019, then the arrival of activist investors like Legion and Macellum, led by figures like Kipper and Duskin with complex backgrounds.
Right, then the web of connections through consulting firms like McKinsey and especially Alvarez and Marsal, linking board members and the CEO to Apollo and the world of distressed debt and bankruptcy.
Plus, the questions around potential coordination, the power of attorney given to Duskin and Kipper, and that really controversial suggestion about short selling before the activism started.
Don't forget the massive, heavily criticized stock buyback program, that $12 billion expenditure, and the company's current weak financial state, the dilution from stock sales.
And finally, that intriguing is speculative idea of the Wharton way. This alleged network potentially influencing things behind the scenes.
Yeah, the video definitely presents a critical narrative, suggesting the situation is heavily influenced by players specializing in distressed companies whose goals might not align with reviving the company for everyday investors.
It really lays out a complex network. It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Given everything we've just walked through from this analysis, what does it suggest about how corporate turnarounds or maybe failures actually happen and the different motivations involved?
It certainly encourages looking beyond the headlines, doesn't it? Thinking about who benefits from different outcomes. A lot to chew on there.